Yeah, I think you hung it up.
You can turn this back on. I think I have it unmuted.
Careful, it's got
Yeah.
an inner,
Oh, you hung up, okay.
you'll find it later.
All right, Madam Secretary, please note for the record that all council members are present tonight. We have a full quorum. I'll now open the meeting. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome all citizens here tonight who've come to address us in any way or just to observe your government actions. You're always welcome here. I'd like to begin, is Dr. McNeil here? I think we have a plaque for Dr. McNeil for his service on the Housing Board.
Yes, sir. Council and staff would like to recognize Dr. John McNeil for his service on the Housing Authority Board of Commissioners from 2017 to 2020. The city appreciates your willingness to serve your community, sir, and presents you with this plaque in appreciation of your time and service.
And I would like to add an addition or addendum to that appreciation for all the hard work that you did during this pandemic in our situations. I've spent a lot of mornings with you.
Yeah.
And I appreciate all that hard work very much.
Well,
Plus, this work
yeah.
you've done.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I thank you for the opportunity to do both these things. And, I'd like to tell you that everything went well with the COVID thing, and it did, but it ain't over.
I know.
So, anyway, but that's a whole nother story for another day. But thank you all very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this team. And, we have a wonderful team here in Victoria. We really do. And I see other communities and I compare them to us, and they just don't got it like we do anyway. But thank you all for all your help, and thank you for the support, and thank you for the trust. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. Now, do we have any announcements?
Yes, sir. We have one announcement from our City Engineer, Public Works Director, Ken Gill.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Just wanted to announce that the City of Victoria tomorrow will begin a stage 1 of the Drought Contingency Plan. And we just remind citizens to practice good landscaping techniques, raise your lawnmower, water your grass as much as you need, but keep it on a conservative level. And we are monitoring the river and keeping on check to make sure we follow all our permits and rules and regulations. If y'all have any questions, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. All right, do we have any items from council?
Yes, I have one. I would like to know if we had any type of update on the People Fund.
Yes, sir. The question is, or an update on the People Fund program the city entered into with People Fund a couple of months ago related to a small business relief program due to COVID. I receive updates from People Fund on a weekly basis and have a conversation with them every Friday. As of this Friday, there were 31 applications that were submitted into the program. About half of those have been rejected for a number of reasons, ranging from, not adequate credit score to some other issues not meeting the criteria. From the ones that have met the initial criteria, the majority of them are still in the process of submitting their paperwork. A couple of weeks ago, the mayor asked me for an update, and at the time, I told him that there were 3 businesses that had been awarded for an amount close to $50,000. However, since that time frame, a couple of these businesses, one of them ended up receiving a loan through the SBA, and another opted to not actually follow through with it. And so, as of now, there's only one business that appears to have had followed through with the process for one loan, and that loan was for an amount of $15,000. You may recall from the eligibility criteria that these businesses were required to submit an application to one of the SBA programs. And so there does appear to be a desire from these applicants to kind of wait out to see if they're going to get that support from SBA. And if they don't, then they'll probably continue the process through People Fund. One of the other elements that was discussed at the call on Friday as well was just the changing dynamics of the availability of grant funds. You may recall at the last council meeting, the briefing on this reimbursement, the CARES Act COVID-19 reimbursement program that specifically detailed the ability to get reimbursed for a grant program. And we discussed at the time that we were exploring the feasibility of having our loan program meet under that criteria. And so what a lot of communities are doing are offering grants. And so that's the feedback that they're getting. Of course, it's still too early to completely say how effective the program will be, since technically a lot of businesses are still trying to make it, but that's where that program stands now. I did also have a conversation on Friday with Lindsay at the SBDC, and she also confirmed the same observation, that a lot of businesses are calling even her office, simply inquiring about when are grants going to become available, when are grants going to be available. And so the landscape appears to be changing a little bit, just in terms of access to capital and just what the expectations are of businesses. But we'll continue to monitor that, and like I said, we receive an update on a weekly basis, and be happy to provide another update at the next council meeting or whenever you'd like another one.
I'd also like to note that if anybody's listening, the SBA idle loan application process reopened.
Yes, sir, yesterday, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other items from council? If not, I'll move on into citizen communication. Tonight, I would ask, we may have many participants tonight, or several, and I would ask for people, when you approach the podium, to watch that little clock there, because tonight, so that we can get on to a full schedule here, I would like to limit everybody to that 5 minutes. And it's very easy to see right there on the podium. I want you to begin. So with that, are there any more cards from anyone to speak?
There might be some folks in this room that did not fill out a card. We do know that there's an individual at City Hall that filled out a card that would like to speak. And that's it.
Why am I getting a
Somebody
playback?
started talking on the,
No, it's
It's the playback.
okay.
the mayor talking on it.
Yeah, once is enough for me.
Got it.
Although you that know me well know I talk too much. So
Derek, is the
anyway.
person at City Hall speaking from there or coming over here?
All right. Well, I'll begin with those in the audience. We do have.
Go get 'em.
One card. Is Brian Parker in the audience? Yes, sir. Then I'll ask Brian to come forward, and then anyone else, after Mr. Parker finishes, then you can come up and have your 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor McCoy, Mr. Garza, and council for allowing me to speak today. My name is Brian Parker. I'm the Vice President of the Victoria Youth Soccer Organization, and I'm here to speak in favor of the agenda item to approve the construction of new soccer fields at Riverside Park, and to thank the City of Victoria and Parks and Recreation Department for considering this proposal that would create a mutually beneficial partnership between VYSO and the City of Victoria. The Victoria Youth Soccer Organization is a nonprofit organization has been providing the youth of Victoria and surrounding areas the opportunity to play soccer for nearly 30 years. We typically have approximately 500 players each fall and spring seasons from the ages of 3 years old to 18 years old. And we offer both recreational and competitive soccer opportunities. Currently, our home is at the Victoria Regional Airport, but due to requirements by the FAA regarding grant funding for the airport, we would be required to pay an increased amount, possibly as much as $20 to $30 per player, for a short-term lease agreement that could adversely affect some of the families in our organization. We're a socioeconomically diverse organization that has registered players from all cultures, all economic backgrounds, and from all areas of town. For some, a $20 to $30 increase in player fees wouldn't be an issue. For others, however, it could mean that their children are now not financially able to play. For example, if a single mother who has 3 children currently playing for VYSO presented with an increase of $20 to $30 per player fees, she would now see an increase of $60 to $90 overall. That additional $60 to $90 could be the breaking point for some of these families, and they wouldn't be able to play soccer anymore with us. Soccer is a worldwide sport that represents all cultures and backgrounds, and BYSO's motto is soccer, the game for all kids. So we wanted to make sure that we held to that motto. Knowing that, VYSO wanted to find a way to continue to provide youth soccer to the community without adversely affecting our families financially. So we began reaching out to anyone we felt might have the means to help. We contacted VISD, UHV, local religious institutions, and private landowners that might potentially have a place for us to play. Although all were very interested in what we were needing, none of them had any opportunities available at the time. Until we contacted the City of Victoria. Immediately, Councilman Young, Mr. Garza, and the Parks and Recreation Department stepped up and said, "We will find you a place to play." Soon after, we were contacted by the former Parks and Recreation Director, Colby Van Gundy. And we had our first meeting at the proposed site. At this meeting with Mr. Van Gundy, we began to realize that this was a real opportunity for us to continue the mission of our organization, while at the same time beginning a relationship with the City of Victoria that will last many years. This realization was further reinforced with our most recent meeting with the new Parks and Recreation Director, Jason Alfaro, as he is equally invested in continuing the creation of this opportunity. The proposed site, which you'll find out later in the agenda item when they give the proposal, is currently not being utilized by the city, although it is located at one of the major entrances to the park. Most likely, this area is not being utilized due to construction design complications and construction costs inherent to construction of structures within a floodplain. But that's not a problem for these soccer fields. And it will look great to see hundreds of kids and their families enjoying themselves playing soccer while others drive by entering the park. The new location also provides easier access for many BYSO families that live in Victoria. Many families have expressed the difficulty in driving out to the airport twice a week for practice and then again on Saturdays for games. This new location alleviates that issue. The relocation of the VYSO fields to Riverside Park will also stimulate the economy in that area. I can see many opportunities for our 500 families per season to visit restaurants and convenience stores in that area after practices, and to be encouraged to take family outings after or between games on Saturdays through the park, the zoo, or even have lunch or dinner at the pump house or other nearby restaurants. The construction of these fields and the creation of this partnership would give VYSO the opportunity to pay the city a per-player fee without passing those fees on to our players. The stability to know that the fields will be our home for many years to come, and it will benefit the local community businesses in that area, makes this a win-win-win partnership for the City of Victoria, the Victoria Youth Soccer Organization, and all communities that we
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it. Anyone else in the audience here, please step forward. And please watch the clock.
I will, it won't be 5 minutes. Hi, I'm Michael Vondro. I live at East North Mobile Home Park, Lot 28. I have a neighbor and they believe yards should never be mowed under no circumstances. And the only way the person is going to mow is if the city manager and assistant city manager and code enforcement and the police get involved. They're the same neighbor that believe you shouldn't never feed your dog. So the police and animal control took their dogs away. But the grass is about 2 foot high and it's getting higher. And I don't know what to do. I mean, I'll mow for free I'll fire my lawnmower up at 8 if that's when it takes. But, you hate to talk to the neighbor when it says, private property, keep off, no trespassing. And some of my neighbors I'm scared of because they've been in and out the jail and penitentiary and stuff like that. The maintenance director, he just got sent to the penitentiary at the park, and the trailer park manager, he got arrested 3 times by the special crimes unit, then again through the police department in San Marcos, and he keeps saying how dumb the police are. If they're that dumb, how come they keep arresting him? They must be doing something right. But, we got a lot of gangsters in the neighborhood, and it's not like you can go talk to them and say, hey, do you mind if I mow the yard? Last time I mowed, he got mad and said, I'm just mowing to snoop. Well, I was mowing because I don't want to have to go to the city council to ask someone to mow it. And the attorney, he wouldn't mow his own yard, and it was 6 foot high. The code enforcement and fire marshal had to get involved, and he still refused to mow it. You would think an attorney would mow his own yard to take care of it. And code enforcement had to get the city of Victoria to mow it and bill him. And all I want is trailer number 18 and trailer number 19 mowed. The grass is anywhere from 2 to 4 foot right now. Summertime is on the 10th of June, and I just want it mowed. I mean, I'll mow it for them for free, if that's what it takes. But, as long as I can have someone guarding me while I'm mowing it to make sure I'm safe, And that's about it. Thanks, and have a good day.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else here in this room that wants to speak? Dr. Shook?
Robert Shook, S-H-O-O-K. I've lived in Victoria 63 years, and all those 63 were in adulthood. So during that period of time, I've spent considerable efforts in 2 languages to learn what Victoria is about. Conclusion is this is the most unique city in Texas. And there are a couple dozen reasons for that. It's all admissible evidence. But it gives us something to think about during these days when it looks like chaos has taken over from regular mornings and evenings and afternoons and early mornings. During that 63 years, I naturally made more acquaintances than friends because not everything you find out is popular. Truth is not a commodity that appears on the stock market, as you've noted, because there ain't no demand. So there's no way to figure it out. I missed some of the comments about the park. So I want to say 1 or 2 things about Riverside, and I'm sorry if I misunderstood. Riverside Park in Victoria is the 2nd temporary site of La Bahia. It's been dug. The artifacts are available. The foundations, 3 feet high, were very obvious until the city, in its wisdom, decided to bulldoze those Spanish ruins and make the drainage a little better where the baseball diamond is, just after you make the turn or as you make the turn on McWright Road. So the drainage was better. Everything that came off of there, of course, couldn't be replaced. We don't even know whether it was dumped in the river or just became fill for improved drainage. But just beyond that baseball diamond are 2 ends of a dam, which at one time was used to irrigate. And Father Baina was doing some irrigation, planting there. I think we've missed the most interesting tourist attraction when we have not pursued those absolutely provable facts. In my view, our tourist program is a poop. It does nothing except tell us of restaurants, and that's fine, bars, and I have nothing against bars, and paddling on the Guadalupe. However, that is not a way to attract tourists, telling them that if they come here, they'll find something different. And the nickname for that department is Explore Victoria. Well, there is nothing offered, and it is rich. And I'm going to have to say the same thing about the Main Street project. It does nothing. It hasn't done anything in any town I've ever visited, except suggest perhaps clean up, paint up, make things look better. And after a certain period of time, the paint's cracked, and if you watch Cuero go through its phases, you know. But downtown Victoria has 2 towns in it.
If I may, Dr. Shook, we're over time.
Okay,
That's all right.
sorry.
But if I may, I would like for you to spend some time with Mr. Etienne there and share all
I
of
have
that
done
wisdom.
that, and, well, I have done that. The diagram that I put on the screen, if you'll give me 30 seconds,
Objection? That's fine.
is not readable. But you can see the lines, and I was hoping that we weren't going back to the previous period when Mr. Garza's predecessor spent that $72,000 to find a new nickname for Victoria and improve them on Crossroads. Don't go through that again. And if you look at those lines and you see Victoria in the middle, you can see that it was the water in Matagorda Bay and the constant transportation through this town to serve the entire military and civilian frontier. Sorry I ran over.
That's all right. And you've spent a lot of time enlightening me about the history of Victoria, and I
Thank you for
appreciate
the
it very
extra
much.
time.
And I hope that our downtown master plan will reflect some of that study of our history, because it
It's-
is rich.
It's past
I
time.
appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Anyone else in this audience who would like to speak? Sir, would you step forward?
Henry Wilkins, I used to live in Victoria, I live about 4 miles out of town. I won't take but a couple of minutes what I want to say. There's been some talk around Victoria, and I'm a little concerned about some of this stuff going on around here. You know, I'm a loyal American, and I love everybody's freedom that we have in this country. But we've got some history here in Victoria that people want to take down. And I think you people know who I'm talking, what we're talking about, the statue down there, Confederate soldier, whatever it is. I've heard some comments from people, and I name no names, and they have a right to voice, just like I do. But they've used comments like, it's a slap in my face. Well, I go through this town and other towns every day, and I see things that slap me in the face. But I don't let it upset my life. So all I've got to say is that's part of our history. And I don't believe that people ought to be concerned about something like that when it happened hundreds of years ago. None of us ever have been slave owners. It has nothing to do with the slaves, but it's a lot of other things, and they want to take that statue down. And to me, I'm against it because it is part of our history, and they need it, leave it alone. I'm sorry, but that's the way I feel. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Anyone else in this audience? Please step forward, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Gay Patek, and I live here in Victoria. And my comments are about the possible removal of the Confederate statue. And I would like to say that our history is not here for us to like or dislike. It's here for us to learn from. And I believe this is a revolutionary tactic to remove our history, and it insults many Americans to do so. I believe our statues are symbols, and we might not agree with everything that they stand for, but they did take a stand. And I think that we should honor those that took a stand, and they also died for us as well. We have a complicated national history. Our nation is complicated, but it's also very beautiful. And I would like for us to remember that. And I would also like to say, if you give someone an inch, they will take a mile. And then it becomes a slippery slope. And I would respectfully like to ask the council members and Mr. Mayor to not move quickly on your decision about the Confederate statue. I ask that you remember that it is our history, and it's not for us to like or dislike. It's for us to learn from. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else in this room that wants to speak? Seeing none, I'll ask if anybody is,
We already cleared the other sites,
The other
Mayor.
sites are-
Yeah, there's nobody in the
okay.
other sites.
so this is all the citizen communication. Anyone
sir.
else? Wait, I have Mr. Alvarez?
Good evening, Mayor, Councilman Emmett Alvarez. I was hoping everybody was going to speak, but since no one else took you up on that, I thought I would. You know, we are going down a slippery slope, and I'll tell you why. We're going to take down that banner behind you. It's got a Confederate flag on it. Are we going to take down the Six Flags at the other corner? It's got a Confederate flag. And there's a lot of other things in this town that have parts of our Confederacy history. For those that are contemplating taking down the statue, what I've read on Facebook mostly is put it in a museum. What museum? You got one already lined up? You got one picked out and willing to accept the statue? Who's going to pay to move that statue? The good citizens of the time in 1912 or before raised that money to put up that statue. So those that want to take it down, I would challenge them. You better bring your checkbook, because if you want it down, you need to pay for it. So I would hope also for any of those that are considering this petition that they would take note that there are specific requirements in our city charter that you must follow. And I would advise council to go back and review that process. A petition on Facebook or whatever they're using is not adequate for that purpose. And then finally, if we really want to come to a decision on this, then take it to the voters. And from my response in my years here, because I can remember hanging around that statue when I was a little kid, and regardless of what it stood for or what it's about, from my youth, it was just something that was incredible, something to admire. So I'd be very careful, council, not to react and slow this process down. There's a lot of things that need to be considered and contemplated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alvarez. So if there's not any more comments, then I will move on into the consent agenda. Is that correct,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Gooch?
Yes, sir. There are 4 items on the consent agenda which will be approved by a single vote tonight. They are first, the adoption of minutes of the city council meeting held on June 2nd, 2020. Second is the second and third reading of an ordinance to annex 10 acres of land owned by the Texan Properties, LLC. Third is the second and third reading of an ordinance to annex 0.193 acres of land owned by DGMP Incorporated. And fourth is the approval of a programmatic agreement with Boys and Girls Club of Victoria, Texas for a community development block grant, public facilities remodel and upgrade project in the amount of $110,181.21.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign.
Item E1, Mayor, is a resolution to approve a professional services agreement with Wood Environment and Infrastructure Solutions Incorporated to provide air quality consulting services in the amount of $256,000.
To accept item E1.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item E1. Any discussion on this matter?
We do have Planned Darrell providing a brief overview. He's walking over from next door.
Oh, okay.
There's a slight delay in the video feed over to the next building.
I guess 5 minutes of running.
Yeah, that's right.
Is that so you can bleep the mayor if he would say something inappropriate?
Yeah, or something. I'm not sure. There's got to be some strategy in there, right? Yeah.
Then he won't be able to come in, because I couldn't come in first time. I had to wait. His temperature's gonna be.
There he
goes.
is.
Several people have left. There are openings if you've got other people that want to come in.
Yeah, Derek will send the message out to them already to head
They
over
can
here.
start their journey over now.
That's right.
I guess y'all already read it before I got over here. I ran as fast as I could.
Motion and second.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here to answer any questions. I will remind Council, this is something we've done since the early 90s. It started out with Victoria College, moved over to the city, and 2 years ago, the governor pulled the funding. Mr. Balknight and I worked together to get us removed from the near non-attainment list. And then, sorry, I ran down the 2 flights of stairs trying to beat Thomas on the way down here. And then although we're not on the list anymore, the state came back and approved the grant funding for what they still consider near non-attainment cities. Since we were part of the original group, we still qualify for that funding. Trust me, I called multiple times, talked to multiple people, tried to explain to them, but we still get it. So what this company will do, will come into town, set up some air monitoring stations. With those stations, and I have kind of a picture here, if I can get to it. There we go. So this is kind of what the station looks like. So I've been in contact with a few property owners in the county that are willing to host these stations so that we can place them around the city. They pretty much run on their own. They come by them once a month or so to check them out, just to make sure everything's working, but everything's electronic in there. They're really unique. They open and suck in air at a certain time of the day, close up, the air gets read and analyzed, and then it's shot through a computer to this company in Austin, to Wood Environmental, where they'll take that information, log it, post it, and then they'll create the reports that we need to turn in quarterly to TCEQ. So there may be some times where if we see a spike, they'll send us some canisters, and myself or Tiffany will go out and take samples here locally and send them back. If we start to see some anomalies or something, depending on where these are located. But it's a real simple type thing. It's covered by the cost of the grant from TCEQ, so there's no dollars out of the city's funds to pay for this. And it's very important for us, and I know Mr. Bachnut knows this because I talked about it when we were up in Austin with the governor and with when we were in session, is that we were the first city to be non-attainment in the state of Texas. And it was just at a time when somebody was driving around with a van testing air, and it just happened to be Victoria. Over all these years, we've proved we're not the problem. Our bad air comes from Houston, San Antonio, as far away as St. Louis, Mexico City. And we've been able through this to track this back to those cities, to track this back to these other countries and prove to the point that we were released from the near non-attainment by TCEQ. And so it's important for us to keep up with this so that, let's say somebody's driving through town a year from now and we get a bad reading. Well, if our information is 2 or 3 years old, do we have to go back through the same steps to get back to where we were? If we have up-to-date information, I can say, look, here's where it came from that day. We tracked it all the way back. It's not our problem. 3% of the bad air that we get blamed for is created here. 3%. And we have the proof to back that up. And so we went back to UT. UT was not able to do this. We went through the process, picked Wood Environmental, and we're asking you tonight to approve them. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
No, I want to thank Mr. Lesack. I mean, I couldn't ask for anything better to get that law changed and still get funding to do this.
Yeah, it was a weird phone call when I got it, because I tried to tell the guy 7 times that we don't get this money. But after 5 other phone calls, we do get the money.
Yeah.
Well, you tried.
Yeah, I tried.
All right. Well, thank you.
Good job.
Mr. Leslie, appreciate it. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Any further discussion from council? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign.
Thank you.
Mayor, item E2 is a resolution to approve a professional services agreement with the Texas Coalition for Affordable Power and a commercial electric services agreement with Gexa Energy LP for power to be provided on and after January 1st, 2023.
Move to accept item E2.
Second?
I have a motion and a second on this, and I think we have a presentation from Mr. Reyna.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. I never saw a slide that showed one slide and a question at the same time. I need Daryl to do my slides too as well. Maybe I'll finish faster. Anyway, good evening. I want to talk to you about energy procurement options. I know we gave you a presentation back, I think, late November, December of latter 2019. I had a couple of consultants up here talking to you, and I promise you it's not going to take that long, and I won't bother you with a lot of stuff like they did in a way, but there's some good stuff here. I cut it short for y'all. But as you know, our current contract, we have a 5-year contract right now. It's fixed for 5 years. We enter in January 1st of 2018, and it ends December 31st, 2022. We procure the contract with TCAP, Texas Coalition of Affordable Power, which I'll explain in more details in a minute. And ever since we engaged in this contract, we average an annual savings of $567,000. So it's been working for us. We have about 2.5 years left, and you're probably wondering why we're talking about this right now. Well, I think a lot of y'all know, in energy commodity markets, you need to start planning ahead of time, especially now. You saw the oil and gas market. It's like investing in the stock market. You want to start ahead of time, make sure you set up your strategy ahead of time. You don't want to just jump in next day and figure out you might be late. So you want to think ahead. Now, who's TCAP? It's a not-for-profit organization. It's made up of cities. There are 162 city members. And in the ERCOT market, the 4 zones, you got your north, south, you got your west, you got the Houston area. We're in the south zone. In the south zone, we have 52 members. You got Corpus Christi, McAllen, Harlingen, et cetera, et cetera. We pull all our energy together, of course, to get the lowest energy price. The city has similar patterns. During the daytime, that's a normal thing, but we have the water plants, we have sewer plants, and at night, which they like, the energy company, is the street lights. That takes up a lot of energy. And of course, there's 15 board members to the TCAP, and they're all comprised and are elected by the cities. And I've been on there for the past 9 years. I have to throw my name in there, man. Come on. So what we have here, as I mentioned, our contract ends December 31st, 2022. We have 2 options to go forward with. Actually, you got more options if you want to, but I'm suggesting these 2 options. The 2 options is this. You can go back to the 5-year fixed term with a fixed price. You just let the dice roll. It's all in. What happens here is that you go in this date, and you want it for 5 years, so you're paying a premium price over the market to acquire 5 years out in the future. So the energy company is going to charge you a little premium. So it worked in the past, but nowadays might be a different environment. So there's another option to look at, which we call the strategic hedging program, the SHP. I'll talk to you about that in a minute. What this one does, which I like a lot, it doesn't lock in 100% of all the energy usage in a given year. It actively manages energy costs by going out to the market, and you're procuring energy every year, only a certain portion as you need. You built it up over the years. And I will explain the process in a little more detail, but I'm going in this year's market to buy 2 years out the road, so I'm locking that month, and et cetera, versus when you got a fixed 5-year contract, you lock in here and 5 years down the road. It doesn't matter what the market is. Hopefully you hit that market, and you might enter today at a certain price, and tomorrow it might be lower. So the advantage of this one is that at least you're controlling the market. You're not controlling the market, at least you're taking advantage of the market and cost averaging everything out. So at any given time, you're going to be at the market price or possibly below the market price. So let me continue. I asked our consultants to go back. Right now, our price is about 0.0387 cents per kilowatt. I want them to go back. If we were doing this program from the initial, what was the savings be? Well, we had another 39,000 in 2018, 71,000 in 19, so on top of the one amount that I gave you earlier, about over $500,000. So the program does work. It's a little more complicated, but it does work. So the mechanism of it, basically, we're going to have about 20 plus credit-worthy energy suppliers. We're gonna have 4 at all times in the pool. And they'll be added, deleted at a given time. And we're gonna have multiple RFPs going out throughout the month to acquire all this energy to accumulate for a year. I will explain. I will get to that point. It avoids all-inclusive buy-in at one time, and you can control it throughout the process. Excuse me. So this is how it works. As I mentioned, our contract ends December 31st, 2022. If we go through this process, we'll start acquiring, buying energy in January 2021 to service January of 2023, 2 years out, okay? Right now, Victoria has an average about 23 million kilowatts, but I'm taking this as an example, but when we go in the market on the South Zone, you're looking over 1 billion kilowatts, so it's a big number, and they like that. So basically what would happen, using this example here, we're gonna take 1/12 of that load and go out and buy 1/12 for January to service us in January 23. We'll repeat that every time, 1/12 the following February to service the February in 2023 for March, and keeps going on, which you end up with, one more, is an overall average over 12 months. It's like going in and you're investing, you're putting money every time. It's no difference. It's a win-win situation for the city. Somebody can come, well, we can beat that. Well, I'm buying it from the market. How can you do that? So anyway, our suggestion here is that staff has recommended, let's go out and try this program. You always, any given time, want to go back to a fix, you can do that. 60-day notice, we can go back to a fix. I don't know if I will like that, but you have the choice to do that. But we also can come back, and if you don't like this program, and believe me, I'll be monitoring it all the time, we always can go back to the fix. But I think this is something that Victoria needs to take a look at. It's progressive, it's cutting edge. You're talking about the market prices and how you can't go wrong. That's our recommendation.
This require every month to come before council to
No, sir, that's
approve
why,
another contract or anything?
that's why you're doing this contract, to give them the authority,
TCAP?
TCAP, to do all the procurement, to go hire the broker, to do all the RFPs and everything else, and TCAP will be monitoring all the whole process.
TCAP's the manager of this fund.
TCAP
take
is
it-
the
So
organization.
it's kind of like investing in the market through mutual funds for the management
In a way,
type.
for example, we can be all, you can, each one of y'all represents a city, for example, and that's TCAP. That makes up TCAP. And each one of y'all have the ability to sell millions of kilowatts. Y'all put all your kilowatts together. TCAPs go out and assigns a broker and a third-party RP to develop the RPs, and they go through the same process. If we were selling, we go out to RP ourselves, we do the whole process, but they're doing it from a larger scale. And they'd be betting 20 of them, of these energy suppliers, not the rep, the billing people, no, the billing folks. I'm actually talking about the actual energy producers. So TCAP will be managing that whole process. Now, if you wonder what's the cost on this, well, we already pay a little fee already embedded in the whole process right now. So it's already covered technically. So, but when you're talking about going out to the market and acquiring energy at the current market price versus entering a contract a year or 2 years later, it's hard to beat, folks. I just can't see how that works. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you.
That was my question. It seems, if the choice is make a decision and you live with it for 5 years versus make a decision every single month, there is a lot more administration, there's a lot more management. And so you're saying that we have a fee that's in there already, but it's hard to believe that there wouldn't be a higher administrative fee.
Well, it's going to be better also with, and when they go out to the pricing too as well. It's going to be like, they go out to quotes, the broker's going to add their little service charge to that too. So all that be across the board. Now, I forgot I was going to say something. Yeah, all-timers, okay.
But you can go back in 60 days and.
If we don't
Just go
like the
back to
process, if it's not working out the way it is, which is hard to believe, we can always cancel and get back to a fixed contract as well.
I guess there's no way to figure out what that fixed rate would be, would there? Because I would like to know in a couple of years from now, maybe I'll be sitting in that audience, but for you to come back up here and go, hey, because we did this, we saved
Well, that-
X amount of dollars.
No, I'll
Yeah,
be
I just-
monitoring, just like the way I'm monitoring this 5-year contract, I'll be monitoring that one as well. Believe me, I'll be, have my eyes on it. I was gonna say something. Oh, no, that was it. Doggone it, it comes in and out.
It's probably an answer to my question about administrative fees.
Oh, well, it was probably something good, I can't remember, sorry.
Gilbert, are you saying that we're gonna finish out the 5-year contract and do this at the same time?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's,
Yeah, we start 2 years ahead so we can accumulate so, when 2023 comes around, we already have that in place.
okay.
So we're not left without any suppliers, anything like that. Does that make sense?
There's no gap.
No gap, thank you.
Good. I like it.
And I forget the gentleman's name that came several months ago to present on this topic. You may recall the consultant came in
Bill.
and presented, the overall concept of this. And so now is the next step of us actually pursuing that hedging recommendation.
I like it.
And believe me, we'll probably get reports on this once everybody's engaged in it. I'll be happy to come back and show you the results because I'm excited about it.
You know what, Gilbert, I'd like to see what we have on our fixed rate compared to what we're buying, so that way we know, hey, we're getting a good deal, we're getting better, and, you know what I mean? Because right now we have a fixed rate, right? Compared to the one that we're gonna be buying for 2023.
I can get the number that when we go out to the market, they're gonna have that option. Depends on how many cities so far want the 5-year. Everybody's moving towards this direction, but if we have enough to do the 5-year fix, I will have that number.
Okay.
But I don't have that today. I have it
Is every
closer.
city gonna have the option to go either way?
We have an
In
option.
the TCAP?
You have an option right now, you got an option after the fact too.
Okay.
Is this a program that's already in place, or it's a new one?
It's a new program that we're doing
So the
in-house.
electric companies could react to it also when they recognize?
If they want to, they can bid.
Yeah,
That's,
they
that's
can,
the beautiful thing about this. So, all these energy companies wants to bid. Hey, knock yourself out, go put your RFP in, and it's like we're doing a proposal, but somebody else is managing the proposal process for us.
One of the things about TCAP too that I don't think you hit on, Gilbert, that might be beneficial for council to be reminded of is the profit sharing component aspect of it and the refunds that we get from TCAP.
There's a section, okay, for example, there's a fee that we charge, right? It goes back to TCAP. Nobody pockets it, walks away with it. And on the board, we allocate that money aside for reserves like any other governmental agency, just in case, pay consultants and everything else, and we have accumulated reserve. In a given year, sometime we decide, okay, it's time to pay back this dividend back or some refunds back to the members. And we have issued checks out to various members, accumulated from $1 million to $2 million total, not a check, total. So bottom line, yes, you're paying a fee for that service, but best of all, that money is yours sitting over there. It cannot, if TCAP closed tomorrow, all that comes back to different cities based on their kilowatt usage. That's all it is. You're invested in there. It's not like you're paying a third party and it's gone.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rayner. Any more questions? Mr. Rayner? Hearing none, any more discussion with council? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Item E3 is a resolution to approve a contract services agreement with Fielder's Choice Incorporated for improvements to the Riverside Soccer Complex in the amount of $222,750.
Move to approve item E3.
Second.
A motion is second on item E3. Is there a presentation?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Mike Etienne, Assistant City Manager. Before Jason comes to the podium, I wanted to kick this off by saying that the 2035 Comprehensive Plan really placed emphasis on two key things. One is to improve quality of life, and two is to promote economic development. And I just want to say that this particular project, this partnership with VYSO accomplishes both. First, in regards to quality of life, these soccer fields will provide a clean, safe place for families to spend time with the families and with the children, and also a place where they come enjoy on a beautiful Sunday to play soccer. The second thing is the economic development perspective. As you know, we've been working really hard to make Victoria a destination city. So with these soccer fields, it gives us the chance or the opportunity to promote sports tourism with the city. We want to make Victoria a destination city, and we see these soccer fields as being one of those avenues. We see families coming from across the region to come to play soccer. And when they come, they will stay in hotels, they will eat in our restaurants, and again, make Victoria a destination city. So we are delighted to have this partnership with VYSO to promote soccer in our community. And at this time, let me ask Jason, who's our new Parks Director, to present the item to you.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to the podium.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So at first,
He's so nervous he didn't even hear what you said.
I heard approval before. I thought we were good.
My first night.
He said, welcome to the podium since it's your first time.
Well, thank you again. So before we really get into the contractors' details and the scope of work, I just wanted to give you a quick background of VYSO. And so Brian was able to come up here earlier and speak with you about that. But VYSO was first established in 1992. They actually serve 500 recreation players each season, which equates to 1,000 recreational players per year. They've historically utilized the airport for their home base, if you will, or for their home fields. And so, as Brian mentioned earlier, there were some things that came up with FAA that is going to increase their fees and their rental fees. So they reached out to Colby Van Gundy at that time, and we were able to find 12 acres of parkland right there at the intersection of Red River and North Bluff Street to be able to put in 6 full-size fields. And the whole goal is to be able to irrigate those 12 acres so we can configure those fields however we see fit. So the location that was identified is right here labeled on the map with the red and the yellow box. And again, so that's about 12 acres in the red box and roughly probably about 4 acres or so in that yellow box. So together, we have roughly 17 acres worth of property. So the main focus is going to be in the red box, obviously, where we have identified the field locations. And so everything that is outlined in white are the fields. And I know there was some concern or some question that popped up about safety. And so we wanted to make sure that that was addressed as well. So going back to the map, the yellow box on the left that's right next to the soccer fields is where we're looking at having the main parking lot area. That's gonna roughly, between that one and the triangle, the yellow triangle, we can fit about 200 cars into that area. We've reached out to VYSO just to ask them kind of what their car count is for their practice and their games, and they're still looking at that and trying to get us that information. The blue square that's directly underneath the yellow square is just to identify some porta potties and some hand wash stations, because I know that's going to be obviously a large concern whenever we do have games taking place or practice taking place. The red hexagon looking dots, if you will, are going to be the stop signs. I just wanted to make sure that those were identified in this map as well. The green line that runs just north of the fields, of those 4 fields, actually runs along Red River Street. That's going to be a 4-foot chain link fence that has a couple of walkways leading into it or leading out to it, just depending if, for in any case, a kid kicks a ball out in the street, we'll have an adult be able to go out there and grab it. And then also along North Bluff Street, from the north to the south on the far right, you can see that green line as well, and that's the remainder of the fence. So we have about 1,400 linear feet worth of fence that's going to be surrounding the perimeter of these fields. In addition to all of that, we do have no parking signs that we plan on putting out, and those are identified on that map with the red rectangular boxes. That's, again, just to identify the areas that we would be putting no parking signs to stop some of that traffic, if you will. And we also identified a overflow parking area that's going to be just on the opposite side of Red River Street. And that's the yellow box on the north side of the road, or the top of the map. And so if we do have the overflow parking, we are looking at potentially putting in a crosswalk right there. There's two driveways. The one that's furthest to the right, closest to that intersection, is pretty well built out, and that's the area that we would use for a crosswalk. So in addition to that, it's very hard to see because everything is so tight right there. But in addition to that green line running east and west, there's also an orange line running east and west. And that is a proposed sidewalk. And so we could actually tie in that crosswalk to that sidewalk down the road, phase it in to be able to get people safely across Red River Street. Any questions up to this point?
I have a
One of the,
question.
oh, I'm sorry.
Is that the site where the old brush pile was at?
Across street. No.
Yes.
Or no?
I think it is,
After
because that's
Harvey?
where
Are you
George
referring
used
to after
work.
Harvey?
No. This is a long time ago
Or are you
when George
referring
was
to
working.
what you talked about the other day?
No.
Okay.
Yes, I believe it is.
Well, see, how many people are getting up for this?
Oh, no.
No, go for it. I'm just teasing.
It was across the street, we see the soccer fields. I don't know what that street's.
This was Bluff
Talking about
running
that-
north
Across from there.
on the right.
We had the pile of chips.
Right.
Yeah, it was not on that section.
Further right.
Yes, it
Oh,
was.
far right.
Side.
Far-
Can't see it.
all the way right.
All the way right.
All the way right.
One more.
Yep.
Right there.
Right there.
Up that field was a brush.
It was up there?
Convention.
Because I was just wondering if you're going to be building soccer fields on top of that old brush pile. That's all I was asking.
No, ma'am, that's not the plan.
Okay.
One of the things that I was gonna bring up was, currently as you're driving down Red River, you don't really feel like you've reached the park until you actually get further down past the old event center space. So one of the things that we hope to change through, and the reason why there's a box up there with the speed limit and some of those elements, is that we want to try and maybe change the feel of it. And some of these elements might come through the Parks Master Plan too, on what other things we could do to change the feel of it. But we want to make it more evident that you've entered the park once you hit that intersection where the soccer fields are, as opposed to making it feel like there's just a through street that gets you to the park, and by chance I passed by soccer fields. We want to change the feel of it to where you enter the park sooner, because it is the park. It just hasn't had that feel to it. And so obviously this will help, assessing the speed limit, looking at trails, and there might be other things that we can do to help with that cause as well.
I was going to comment that I like the parking lots by the trails, because sometimes I drive by and think, hey, that'd be neat to be on that trail, but I didn't bring my bike, and it's a long way to park. So I think we may get some use of the trails too.
Yeah, that's a good point, the dual purpose, especially the one across the street.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Could you extend an entryway into the nature trail from that? A little 4-foot, essentially across, so that they could enter in?
That or from the one up top?
I'm talking the one by the triangle, either the triangle or
okay.
Or the other one.
the other one.
Or the other
But somewhere
rectangles.
right in there where there's a tremendous amount of parking that could easily access, because oftentimes you get to the walking trail, there's a lot of parking down around the
Yeah.
golf course and stuff like that, but there's only 6 or 7 spots, and that gets
True.
filled up very quickly on the weekends.
We'll definitely take a look at that to see where it makes most sense. But yeah, those are good thoughts to kind of, take advantage of the parking areas.
The other comment with the stop signs, I don't know if it behooves us to look at doing one of those flashing ones with all the kids and stuff around there, that they grab a little bit more attention.
Yeah, we can look at that as well.
I don't know if that's
Absolutely.
a possibility.
Absolutely.
These are 6 equal-sized courts?
Yes, sir.
Because they're not drawn that way. The two smaller ones are narrower. Leave it to
We didn't
me
have
to
the
notice
calibrated
that.
eyeballs taken place.
Yeah, I didn't think they looked it either, I agree with you.
Where's the asterisk not drawn to
Yeah.
scale? Right?
Well, how do we know
scale.
they're gonna fit that?
Just ask.
The other thing,
Because
Jason.
it does mention you could build more if you made them smaller, so I wouldn't.
Well, that was a question I had for what about the different age groups? Because there's different field sizes. How does that play in?
Well, that's something that we discussed briefly with Brian. And again, this is just a conceptual of what the layouts could look like. That's why we want to irrigate the entire 12 acres. So when we do talk with VYSO and what, kind of field requirements that they're going to need, we can lay it out appropriately.
Right.
I've got two questions.
Yes, sir.
Again, I think you mentioned it, but I don't remember. There's 3 red boxes. There's 2 on Red River and 1 on Bluff along that orange line and along the green line.
Yes, sir.
What are those 3 red boxes again?
Sure. So those are just identifying no parking signage that we would end up placing along those right-of-ways.
But it would be
And
no
it's-
parking the whole length, right?
It's not,
Right.
correct.
The whole
Because,
length.
what we envision potentially happening is people wanting to take the path of less resistance and not going all the way to the parking lot and just, parking
Parking
somewhere
right
near
there.
the intersection
Right.
and hopping the fence or, or whatever the case may be. So we want to make sure that we at least have the mechanisms in place to be able to enforce something like a no parking area.
Well, there's a pretty good ditch there too,
Yes, sir.
along that area, so you may end up in the ditch if you get off that pavement.
The other
Some people will put their King Ranch truck in the ditch though.
It's like that at the airport.
Four-wheel drive it, right?
The
Yes,
other
sir.
question, there's a light red box under the 2 parking areas. You see it's directly south, right close to the blue box for the porta potties.
Oh, yes, sir.
What is that light box?
That's just identifying additional area for parking if needed. And so that area is relatively flat in nature. So that has the potential to continue to expand that parking lot if needed.
That was originally a parking spot for the Riverside Convention Center. Why wouldn't you do that now instead of having the other parking lot where the triangle is? It seems like it would make more sense to make that whole area, it's connected, it's closer. Why wouldn't you want to do that?
Well, that's a great idea. One of the things that staff has mentioned to me that we basically going to go into that area once approved and kind of scrape it all down and spray it out because a lot of that has overgrown from, I guess, just the years of neglect, if you will, and not keeping that.
I have a third question.
Yes, sir.
Is there gonna be a fence on the south side along the, I know there's a barbed wire fence there to keep the cattle in that are in that field now. But on the south side, right there where your cursor, just take all the way
Across.
to the right along that.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Is there gonna be a chain link fence there? Or we're just gonna keep that barbed wire fence?
So currently, we don't have a plan for that, but that's definitely something that we could look at addressing.
And the reason is, there's a lot of deer down there,
Okay,
a lot of skunks, a lot of possums, raccoons, a lot of digging,
okay.
could damage the fields.
We'll definitely take a look into that. All right. Any other questions so I can?
What's
If not, I'll
the
push on.
availability of services so that you could add concessions at a later time?
Well, we do have a water line that's basically running down that road parallel with Red River, and we're identifying electrical right now. And so,
The old convention
Because-
center there, I'm
One,
assuming that there's plenty of power, sewer, water.
Sure, but
Absolutely.
keep in mind too, the new FEMA maps.
Right.
And so the new FEMA maps also increase the floodway going through Riverside Park, and so some aspect of this is impacted by that. More than likely, what you will see is more of a food truck type of concept and mobile vending of sorts that we'll probably try and get, as opposed to having to build a structure because of some of the requirements that would come from that.
correct.
I
You
think the
mentioned,
food truck idea would be fantastic.
you
for
mentioned
enterprise.
the floodway, and I made that comment to somebody yesterday, that they said, well, sometimes that area floods. Said, well, this is gonna be just grass, and it floods, and then it dries out again. That's the perfect use for that area. You can't build anything on it, so.
Correct.
This is, but just for anybody that gets upset that it might flood, well, yeah, it might.
Yeah, when you're looking at this,
Play golf.
bringing up that food truck idea, or some type of mobile concession stand, keep that in mind when you're laying out your parking lots and stuff. If you could have some locations where they could set up and maybe
Power access.
leave it and then,
Okay.
All right.
All right, keep
Any
going.
more questions?
I think he's got a couple more.
Just a few more slides really quickly. So just to kind of give you a background in Fielder's Choice, they were founded in 1999. I won't read this verbatim, but they are part of the TIPS cooperative, or the co-op, if you will. They have built over 400 athletic fields. Some of them are pretty notable. Minute Maid Stadium with the Houston Astros, the Holloway soccer fields at Rice University, and the Cougar softball stadium at University of Houston. So the vendor that we have selected is highly capable of handling this project. So the proposal for the construction is laid out here, basically to strip and grade the existing grass and the soil down an inch, basically making sure everything's level and has adequate drainage. Installation of the irrigation system, again, the entire 12 acres and not necessarily just those 6 fields that you saw. In addition to that, the installation of sprig, Bermuda sprig. And so that's, for those that don't know, sprig is, I mean, it's, you're planting grass seed, if you will, or grass little pockets. So that's going to take a little bit of time to be able to grow in. Fencing, obviously, told you earlier, 1,500 linear feet worth at a 4-foot high fence. And that's it. So the timeline is right before you. So hopefully at the end of this, we'll have council approval, be able to move forward with the project basically the next day. And so once we give the vendor approval, they have told us that they have about 2 weeks worth of mobilization that needs to take place. So in essence, they can start the project within 2 weeks after we give them notice. So if all of that works out for us, but by July 1st, we would be looking at the start of construction potentially. The construction would take place through August 10th, and then we would then have the grow-in period for the Bermuda grass from August through October. Staff would then go in October, November-ish timeframe and overseed with rye to be able to make sure that everything is ready to go for VYSO by the end of February, first start of March. And so this brings up the partnership between VYSO and the Parks and Recreation Department. I'm just going to touch on some of this, but our field maintenance and the prep would basically be handled by the Parks and Recreation Department, so all the mowing, the chalking, just the trash removal in general. We would coordinate schedules with VYSO because we definitely want to make this VYSO's home base, but we do want to be able to provide recreational activities and leagues and programs for the public. And in addition to that, have it open to the public for their use as well. And then we would obviously coordinate sports tourism and public use with that. So VYSO's responsibilities would be the league registrations, handling all of that, supplying us with the schedule. In addition, they would also contribute $5 per player to offset some of the field maintenance for 2021 and 2022. And then after 2022, it would then bump up to a $10 per player contribution from VYSO. So again, some of the recommended uses that we have, exclusive use with VYSO during their practices and their games. And we would also schedule designated timeframes for them, again, for their practices. Parks and Recreation will coordinate everything. We'll utilize the fields for the adult soccer leagues, and then again, just kind of open it up to the public for them to be able to use on a first come, first served basis or a rental rate. And with that, are there any additional questions?
One thing that came to mind when I used to sit out there listening to the, I thought I heard a discussion one time about the sprinkler systems on the golf course, how the controllers were ruined because they were in the ground. I would think that you might want to mount these controllers up on pedestals above the floodplain, or the flood deal.
Yes, sir.
I think we did that at Riverside.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
I have a question, Jason.
Yes, ma'am.
For the adults to use it, would you allow like tournaments and things like that for the adults, or is it just for regular games?
Well, yeah, I think we could, I think we could use it for tournaments if needed. I'm just not sure how heavily those would be used during the off seasons, because we don't have any lighting out there. BYSO is planning on bringing out their portable lighting units to be able to light the fields at night, but that is a possibility for them to be able to use it. Yes, ma'am.
Because you do have the teams that play at community center right now. So I don't know if you would be willing to work with them too. I know that they're out there and they do their own maintenance and stuff out there.
I think that's definitely an option. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I'm going to clarify one more thing, if you don't mind. So the fields strictly are the company that we're going to contract with to build them. The parking lots and the fence, that's our responsibility, City of
Yes,
Victoria.
sir. Yes, sir.
Sorry.
Fine. On that fence that goes around there, any advertising possibilities? Local companies, little see-through things that, but can advertise, it's just a potential revenue with all those people out there.
Absolutely.
Which
Yes, sir.
could possibly take care of some of the cost of maintenance and stuff.
Absolutely.
Good idea. The reason we don't have to bid this, just so everybody knows, is it's TIPS vendor, right? Otherwise, the construction services contract would have to be bid.
That is correct.
Look forward to some great fields. If everybody votes, I think it'd be a real asset to our community. And I appreciate staff working so hard on this.
I appreciate the city stepping up and taking care of a big need that came as kind of a surprise to everybody.
Sure.
For it, so thank everyone who's worked on this very much. Any further discussion, any
Thank
questions?
Dr. Young, too, for.
Thank you.
On that.
I couldn't promise anything. I just promised I'd bring it up. Unlike
We'll make
Mr.
him a
Parker said
referee.
out there, he said, you know, I can't promise that. I just promised I can bring it up.
Well, thanks for everyone who's worked on it. Any further questions? Any further questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We'll move on into city manager reports.
All right, we do have one item today. I'm going to ask Mike to kick it off.
Thank you, Jesus. Again, Mike Hatesian, Assistant City Manager. So as you know, some cities across the country have a resource gap. And when you consider the amount of needs that the cities have, and also the need to rebuild the streets, sidewalks, curbs, and gutter, and also how to maintain a great quality of life. So there is a resource gap that many cities see. So one of the issues that we face here in Victoria is that the land use and development patterns do not generate enough property tax revenue to cover the cost for service. To that end, we need to know specifically where to invest our infrastructure and also for economic development. So to help us close the resource gap and become more financially resilient, the city has contracted with Vidunity to essentially perform a land use fiscal analysis for properties within the city of Victoria. A team of city staff worked closely with Vidunity to develop the report. The team members include myself, City Manager Garza, our CFO Gilbert Reyna, our Assistant Finance Director Wesley Janasek, our Development Services Director Julie Fulgham, our Public Works and Engineer Director Ken Gill, our GIS Administrator Adrian Cañas, and of course, again, our City Manager who led the way. So with that said, I would like to ask Kevin Shepard, who is the CEO and President of Vidunity, to come forward and present to us the land use fiscal analysis report.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, City Manager. It's good to be here in person. I think last time we did this virtually. So I was sitting back there and I was trying to imagine how that looked with my big round head on one of those screens somewhere. So I'm just gonna get straight into this. When city manager first reached out to me, these were some of the questions that we talked about, and as Mike was just talking about too, this concept of fiscal sustainability, fiscally solvent and sustainable cities is something that I'm extremely passionate about, something that our firm has really focused in on over the last 5 or so years. Going back to the work that I did nationally, as I think you guys heard me in that last presentation. Specifically to Victoria and what we were talking about is this issue of, is the city fiscally sustainable in its current pattern? Are you going to have the resources to pay for services now and in the future? And more specifically, if not, what can you do with your development pattern to start to close that gap over time? The fiscal analysis, once we're done with it, there's a lot of different applications for it. Specifically, again, to Victoria, some of the things that we've talked about. We've looked at some land use discussions. We've talked about capital improvement, infrastructure design and investment decisions. We've talked a little bit about economic development decisions, where to focus economic development investment dollars. So I like to talk about fiscal sustainability in this fiscal analysis in the context of a common language that you can connect different things in a community to the average resident or the taxpayer, right? Everybody cares about how far is my property taxes going? What am I getting in return for my investment? This fiscal analysis starts to give us a way to look at how different development patterns and service decisions are doing in terms of return on that investment. This is the methodology outlined in this phase. What we did were those first 2 levels. The first step is to look at property tax revenue per acre. So we take the property tax revenue that parcel collects or generates for you. We divide that by the size of the parcel, and you get a revenue per acre number. The second step that we did is we took your current budget, the portion of the general fund that's paid for from property taxes, and allocated that back to the parcels. So then you can get a net revenue per acre at the parcel level for which ones are net positive and which ones are net negative. The future phase, this is something that I think if those of you who saw my presentation at TML, something that I covered in that first presentation with you all a month or so ago. The level 3 is where we go into what you really need. The first level 2 shows what do you have right now, how are you doing right now. Level 3 goes into what would you need to pay for all of your streets, to provide the parks, libraries, staff, public safety, those things. If you had, what you think you need, or kind of the wish list level, what that model would look like. So part of this effort for us is to understand your development pattern over time. How have you grown? How fast have you grown? Where have the people gone? This shows your population over time. The dark green line is the one I'll call your attention to. You can see in the early years of the city up to about 1930, you grew at a fairly slow, steady rate. But then beginning in the 30s, 40s, 50s, you started to add a lot more people, and really after 1940 is when the growth took off. This map shows where those people went. So the dark green there is the core of your city, where those population up until 1930, where they resided. So you see a very small footprint, what I'll refer to as a traditional grid development pattern. And when you added people in the city, you didn't add a lot of additional area. And if I go back, well, let me point out the rest of the slide first. Starting in the 50s, you can see where the city started to add a lot more land, right? 50s, 60s, 70s, all of that yellow into the orange and the red. So between 1950 and 2015, your service area grew by over 13 times, but your population only grew by 4 times. What that means is you expanded the service area of the city, you extended the infrastructure, your parks, fire, police, all of those have a broader area to cover, but you've diluted the tax base by spreading those people out. If I go back to this one, look at that chart on the left side and go about halfway down to 1950. And what you'll see there in 1950 is your population got up to about 16,000, your acreage was 1,800, and your density, your people per acre, was over 8, getting close to 9 per acre. So in that smaller area, you were packing more people in, right? Look what happens after 1950. Your density, that population per acre starts to go down and down and down. And your service area is going up and up and up. So your costs that you're adding, and streets is the best way to think about this. The miles of street, the miles of water line, sewer line, it's going up and up and up, but your tax base, again, that density, the people and the properties that you have to cover it are going down. This is your general fund. This study focuses on property tax. You've got about a third of your general fund revenue coming from property tax. My opinion, that's a little fragile. And I think the situation that we're in right now is pointing out why. When times are good, your sales tax, hot tax, development fees, fees from new development will do well. And you'll hear the conversation of lowering the tax rate because you have that other revenue to balance that out, right? When times are slow and the sales tax slows down, the property tax is really that one revenue source that the city can depend on. That's a little more predictable. And your general fund, just to back up for a second, your general fund is the fund that you, as you all know, is the fund that you use to pay for basic services, right? You cover staff out of that, you'll cover streets out of that, you'll cover parks, public safety. So when we think about this in terms of what you need, the general fund is something we like to benchmark for per capita, which is per person, per household, and per acre. This gets more important when we do the second phase of the study, when we're projecting out what you need, as the city continues to grow in service area and population. And I guess I'll just point you to the general fund per acre one to focus on that one. Victoria's general fund per acre right now is a little over 2,000. What we've seen statewide is as a city grows both in size and population, and as it gets older, that general fund per acre starts to go up. And if you look at, take Baytown in this example over in the tables up in the top left, they've got a pretty similar population to Victoria. Their general fund is significantly higher, and their density, is just a little bit higher. So the way that they're making that up, the way that they're creating that additional general fund revenue is through that higher tax rate. What I think the opportunity for a lot of cities in Texas to do here, especially ones like Victoria that you do have a lot of vacant land left to develop, is how can you develop differently so that you can have that strong general fund per acre without having to raise the tax rate. What kind of pushed me into this work was working around the country in other parts of the country that were older. They were already behind, and so it's raising taxes, street fees, utility fees, every kind of fee you can think of to try to catch up. We have an opportunity in Texas with the growth, with the economic development that we have to try to stay in front of that and manage our development pattern a little bit better. So this is how your land is distributed right now. It's basically a third between single family is 36%, commercial is 27%, and you've got 34% of the land in the city limits that's undeveloped right now. There's more detail in the full report on where these maps and how these calculations came from. But to walk through a few of the maps, this is where we always start. This is appraised value. This is what everybody, the tax bill that you get that shows here's what your property is appraised at. The dark green are the ones that have the highest values. The red have the lowest values. The second map that I'll show is property tax revenue by parcel. This tends to follow the appraised values. The main difference between this one and the previous one is that exemptions come out of this. So if it's an exempt parcel, a city-owned parcel, something that has exemptions on it, that would reduce the revenue, the actual revenue to the city. And then this map shows where we start the per acre calculations. So this is the property tax revenue per acre. This takes the actual revenue that the city gets, divides it by the size of the parcel, and you get that revenue per acre number. Don't be alarmed by the red, green, and any of that. This is pretty typical of what we see, but I'll point your attention to a couple of areas. The ones that show up green on this map, the Central Business District, that little kind of small green spot in the bottom left where we're sitting right now. And then you see a couple of those neighborhoods to the east and up to the north that are showing really strong as well. Before I go to the next slide, something to talk about here. Right now, if I go back to this one, your overall general fund per acre for the city is $2,000. Using that tax rate, the 32%, I think, of general fund that's paid by property taxes, that means about $640 per acre on average is what comes from property tax. So if we come back to this map here, anything on this map right now that's over $640 per acre is breaking even or making money. What this doesn't have included is those projected costs of what you really need to pay for the streets and future costs. For the sake of just kind of having a clean break on this map, I did and said, what if that number were $1,000 per acre? So what if you needed $1,000 per acre to cover your basic costs? I think if we were to do that number, it's going to be higher. It'd be closer to $1,500. Would be my guesstimate just based on the work that we've done right now. But to point out the developed and undeveloped, the relationship or the impact that development and undeveloped areas have on these numbers. 70% of the city's area right now is generating under that 1,000 per acre number. But that's only 24% of the parcels. If we flip that, 76% of the city's parcels and 30% of the area are generating over that $1,000 per acre number. So most of the parcels in the city are hitting that target, but it's only 30% of the city's land area. So you have a lot of large parcels that have, most of them that have yet to be developed, that are kind of pulling this down. So this shows the net per acre when we take the current budget costs and allocate them down at the parcel level. This is what it looks like. And again, I won't spend a lot of time on this one right now, but those same areas that were green before are still green. They hold their value even when you load the current budget costs in. And right about now you're saying, man, this map is really zoomed out. I can't see squat, right? So sometimes the 2D maps, the 2D, the top kind of plan view, don't always tell the story. So we like to have the 3D maps as well. In the final deliverable, what the staff will get is actually a link to this online where you can spin it around and zoom in and out. But as far as a takeaway from this map, if you look at those same green areas that in the previous map were doing well, you'll see the CBD, the Central Business District, there on the bottom left. And you'll see the neighborhood over there to the east on the right, and then there's one up to the north. They all show up as green, but in this map, the height of the bar represents the value there. So you can see that CBD area is doing significantly more than some of those residential areas. And this is your net. So this was with the budget costs loaded in. And you'll see, if I flip back and forth, you'll see a lot of that stuff in the middle of the map. That's in the yellow and orange category. It starts to go down into the red and the dark orange. This is just one that zooms in kind of on the downtown. The CBD is shown there with the rectangle around it. But what we start to do with this is look at the parcels and say, why are the green ones green? And why are the red ones red? And what can you do with your development pattern? What can you do with your infrastructure investments to make more of the red green? For it to.
So that downtown area is much higher even than the mall area.
Mhm.
As far as generating tax, property tax.
Yes, sir.
Specific for property tax, yes.
Density.
And I'll address sales tax here in a minute, because we do get that question, what about sales tax? Well, I'll address it right now. Sales tax tends to follow the same trend. When you put more people in an area, it creates more demand for business, and so your sales tax, we can't map sales tax to the parcel level like we can property tax. But we are working to get more data to try to look at this, and I'm gonna use a slide here in a few minutes to talk a little more about the jobs and the sales tax side of this. As well. But in general, when you put more people in an area, you create more demand for business in that area. When you spread them out, you dilute the demand for business, or you create a demand for more of the big box auto-oriented stuff that takes more land and more cost to develop. This chart, some people don't like the maps, they like charts. This one sums everything up by your land uses and the size of the parcels. Just the thing I'll call your attention to with this is the small lots do the best, both for single family and commercial. The smaller the lots have the highest revenue per acre for the city. The second thing I'll point out here is the column for the average improvement value. In some communities, we are having a lot of conversation about affordable housing. When you think about this in terms of the revenue per acre for the city, and the smaller lots doing the best. But you also see those small lots have the lower improvement values. So meaning the value of the structure on the land. So a small home on a small lot can be more affordable for the property owner. It's also the biggest winner in terms of property tax revenue per acre for the city. It's also, when you look at smaller lots, it costs less to serve in terms of street infrastructure. And I've got one, I'll show you that as well. But not just for single family, that's also important for business. So for entrepreneurs, for small businesses that are getting started, they don't need the bigger space, right? So those small buildings in the main street, the downtown pattern, again, they're winners for the city. They're more affordable for a business owner to get into. This is just a chart that shows another way to look at this. The lot sizes are on the bottom, the values are on the left side, and what you see is the smaller lots have the highest revenue per acre, and as you push to the right, the revenue per acre, as the lots get bigger, the revenue per acre goes down. These were your top 10 in the entire city when we did this based on FY19 on the certified rolls for 2019. The majority of these are in your main street. Staff, I think it was Julie pointed out that, actually it may have been city manager that pointed out, what about the O'Connor Plaza? What about the Goodwin Building? Why is that not on here? I'll come to that. I'll compare it to this one here in a second. This was your number one. This is the top producer in the city, the Prosperity Bank Building. A couple reasons why. The lot size is small. It's only 0.3 of an acre. The value, it was appraised pretty high. But another important factor here is the building takes up the entire lot. So in terms of tax generating building on a property, the building covers the entire thing and then it goes vertical. So this has all the characteristics of a high producing parcel in terms of revenue per acre. It's a small lot, it's a vertical building, and it has a high building footprint or building coverage. This was number 3 or 4 on the list, and I'll use this to talk about the small business or the small lot. This one is a very small lot, 0.045 acres. It appraised at a lower value, but in terms of net revenue per the city or revenue per acre for the city, it's a really high number. If you also think about this in terms of services, that's basically 25 feet of street that building is using. So if you take one block of street and you cut that into 4 wide big lots, or you cut that into 10 small narrow lots like this, you start to recoup that street investment a lot faster. These also tend to be the buildings that add character to a community. You see, these are the smaller ones that folks see, or that are also, if you look at codes today, are harder to build. So that's one of the conversations that come out, a lot of the work that we do too, is how do we get this back? If we wanted to build more small buildings, how do we, or how could we? So this gets back to, this shows the comparison between the Goodwin and the Prosperity. Julie pointed out that the main reason that this one didn't make the top 10 list was because the appraised value for the Goodwin building was significantly low because of the hurricane damage. But there's a couple other reasons of why this building doesn't do as well as Prosperity. I mentioned the Prosperity Bank building takes up 100% of the lot. The Goodwin building takes up about half of that parcel. The other half of that parcel is the public plaza, which does add value to downtown, there's no doubt. But in terms of the revenue per acre metric by itself, it doesn't do as well because you have land that doesn't have the building on it. So we went and we looked at 2020 and what its proposed valuation is. And you can see in the top right, it jumps. In 2019, it was appraised for 2.2. In 2020, it jumped up to 7.3. So this is a more realistic comparison. And if we use 2020 numbers, this would be number 2 on your list behind Prosperity Bank. But again, the reason it's not number 1 is because the building footprint on the Prosperity Bank is the entire 0.32 acres. The building footprint for the one on the right is only 0.5 acres out of the 1.6 total lot size, if that makes sense. So just to illustrate this, when we start to say, you have a gap, how do you close it? The default in every city is, well, we can play with the tax rate. The way, if we need to generate additional revenue, we can raise the tax rate. Nobody likes that. Nobody wants to do that. You all sitting out there, I know you don't want to do that. So what's another option? Change your development pattern. This is one of the most powerful ones that we have with, I'll do this in every city, but these are Victoria examples. On the left, you see the Main Street mixed use. It's 1.5 acres of footprint, and it generates over 13,000 per acre in property tax revenue. On the right, you've got a suburban strip mall, 3.7 acres, so it's double the size, and that revenue is only $2,100 per acre. Part of that is that half of that parcel or half of that area is parking lot. So again, another example of the kind of conversations we get into is what value does the parking have? Or when we look at how much parking to put, know that when you're using up land for parking or stormwater detention or anything like that, that's adding cost without generating revenue. So not saying it's not valuable and not needed, it is, but the cost factor hasn't been accounted for as much as I think it should be. This zooms out a little bit more. This shows your 4 blocks of your downtown, 5 acres, over 16,000 revenue per acre. That's with one of those 4 blocks being a park. There's no building on that third one, and the one on the right is the one that we just talked about that has half of that parcel that's undeveloped as well. Compare that to the one on the right. You have over 3 times the land footprint, and it's under 2,000 an acre in terms of property tax. So this is where I'll talk about sales tax and jobs again for a second. Yes, does a big box bring jobs and sales tax? It does. Can that same amount of jobs and same amount of sales tax generated by that big box be handled in that 4 block downtown? Yep, it can. Just a couple more just to zoom in for you and talk about the kinds of development patterns and understanding a little more of how they affect this revenue per acre. This is your core CBD. You've got an average lot size in there of 0.26 acres. And on average, you're getting over 8,000 per acre out of those properties. There's some that are vacant in there. There's some that have parking lots on them. But on average, you're getting over 8,000 per acre out of that CBD, with a couple of those blocks, like the Prosperity Bank and others that are doing significantly more. just to look at a couple of residential examples. This is up in the northwest part of the downtown, kind of the historic, what I was kind of calling it the historic kind of mansion residential. But 0.35 acres is the average lot size there. The appraised values are higher, and you see a revenue per acre there of 7,500. This goes down to the south part of downtown. Here, the lot sizes are a little bit lower, so they're 0.2 acres. And because the appraised values are lower, you see this drop all the way down to 2,200 per acre. What I'll point out here, and I know a significant part of this is floodplain that we talked about with staff, but this is an opportunity, or all around your CBD is a huge opportunity to me, because this is the land development pattern with the grid and the smaller, narrower lots that has the potential for really high ROI, or really high revenue per acre development. So this area, basically all four sides of your CBD is where I would be looking at infrastructure investment, economic development incentives, and trying to get more of that live, work, play, mixed-use, walkable neighborhood kind of development that a lot of people want. Small investments from the city can get a pretty high return in this area. Next one goes to a neighborhood that green neighborhood over on the east side. The average lot size here is 0.13 acres. That's why this neighborhood does so well. Because when we saw this one, I was surprised. A lot of times we see the kind of the residential on the periphery of a city, and it doesn't do as well. The reason this one did so well is the combination of small lots and high values. Contrast with this over on the north side, this has larger lots. This has over a half-acre lot, about the same average appraised value, but that revenue per acre is a lot lower. So one of the conversations that I'll have in cities is we want bigger lots. Bigger lots equals bigger values, bigger lots, bigger values, better for the city. Not always the case when you think of it in terms of revenue per acre and return on the investment of the streets and the utilities to serve it. This is only one metric. There's other ones for sure, but I see a lot of cities, there's a lot of the typical kind of fast growth suburban communities that are building a lot of half-acre homes, $200,000, $250,000, and they're a money pit. They're never gonna be able to pay for themselves. So this is for Ken. This is for the engineers, and this is another thing that got me into doing this is why don't our cities have enough money to pay for their streets? I'm gonna contrast two examples of two recent CIP projects that you guys have done. This is Woodway Phase 1. The value or the cost of this project was $1.2 million. And it's an asphalt street, so we're estimating you'll get 25 to 30 years out of that street. If you look at the top right, the average property value in this neighborhood is around $288,000. You're getting a total property tax revenue from all the parcels in that green boundary there of almost $150,000 a year. So at your current ratios, what you have right now, the percent of property tax revenue that goes to streets, you'll pay this project off in 19 years. So you'll pay it off before you have to replace it. That's good. We don't see that very often.
And I'll add that doesn't, if you go back real quick, that doesn't include some of those maintenance costs that you would have to do during that 25-year cycle.
Correct.
Like your seal coats, your slurries, your, crack sealing, all those elements aren't even accounted for in that cost estimate or timeline.
Yep. This was just the one-time reconstruction. It doesn't factor in a lot of other costs. This is just purely just for this individual or this single project. This is more typical of what we see when we do street analysis like this. This is North Heights. This one cost $1 million. The values in this area were lower, and so right now this one would take 136 years to pay off. And what we see in a lot of cities is when you do this over and over and over across the whole city, that's why we have the infrastructure funding gap that we do. Now flip this, the opportunity here, I mentioned the neighborhood to the south of the CBD a minute ago. Investing in fixing the streets is the first thing a city can do to stabilize and increase property values. So what I would like to do is look at this 5 years from now and say, did this investment, get that bump in the property values, at least stabilize them and start to increase them, and also incentivize or create the place for some of the infill in some of these lots. Just the last thing that I'll wrap with here is just a couple of the takeaways for Victoria. I mentioned that at the start of this, the service area grew by 13 times, population grew by 4. Density is a tricky word. Some people fight it, don't like it. It's one metric of a lot. I think the conversation just needs to be, use this information to align your development pattern with what people are willing and able to pay for. Right now in so many cities, there's a gap. They're paying one thing, they're getting something different, and these maintenance costs are gonna be left to really our kids, is who's gonna get stuck with the bill on a lot of this. In Victoria, 34% of the city's service area is vacant, undeveloped. So yes, some of that is in floodplain, but a lot of it has to do with lack of infrastructure out to some of these undeveloped areas, large tracts with single ownership. But before you even think about new development and punching additional infrastructure out to these undeveloped areas, I think you have a ton of opportunity for infill and to get some of these existing neighborhoods to preserve and enhance those property values. A small investment there can go a long way. If you might remember the Brownsville slides that I showed the last time I spoke with you guys, where they were incentivizing growth on kind of the periphery of the city, and they were by doing that, they were pulling people out of their core up to the north part of the city, but they still had to serve that core with police and fire and parks and staff and everything else. You guys are in the same situation. I don't see the really aggressive population growth here that would say, go build a bunch of new on the edge and still, keep your folks in the core. And I don't know as much about what the market study here in Victoria would say in terms of the growing demand for the kind of the walkable live work, whether it's the retiring, the boomers that are retiring, or the young folks out of school. What we see in the North Texas area for sure is much more demand for that kind of walkable neighborhood that you guys have the bones for around your downtown. So where you can live and you can walk or bike into downtown fairly easily. So that's an underserved market in Texas, with a lot of people moving from outside Texas in. It's something for you guys to think about, because you have a development pattern there to handle a lot more people and commercial development if you focused your incentives in that direction. So I'll wrap there, and probably got you guys snoozing from a bunch of numbers, but any questions or anything you want to add?
I just want to add a couple of points. One of the big objectives of going through this exercise was not only to help us understand, where we are now, but really help us become more educated on how we develop a strategy moving forward. You hear oftentimes us talking about quality of life, and you hear, us talking about how investing in downtown enhances quality of life, or even investing in Riverside Park enhances quality of life. But for a lot of people, that's hard to wrap their head around, right? Because it's not really a tangible thing. This whole quality of life concept is not tangible. So I wanted to make sure that we had information that was tangible, so that we can add that to the conversation, so that as we do embark on downtown master plan, parks master plan, or drainage master plan, or have conversations with developers about developing inside the city limits, that we not only take into account the feel-good stuff, but also recognize that these are business decisions for us. That what we decide to do and how we decide to influence growth will not only enhance livability, but will have an impact to our pocketbook. And we need to add that piece to the conversation as well. And this is just a step in that direction. As you saw in one of the earlier slides, there's a whole other phase to this that's gonna kind of bring to light more of what this resource gap is. But as you can tell, it's a lot of information, and so we wanted to split it up and kind of start somewhere. And so this is where we are now. I think this is good timing for us as we start the downtown master planning exercise and as we have conversations, executive session all the time about different economic development projects. Let's look at it from this lens. One of the other elements, if you think back to when we showed a large timeline about all the different master planning or studies that we want to do, that it's time we had allocated funds to also just relook at our code. And we need to understand some of these elements so that when we have a conversation with you, with the community, on our code and what it should be, we take into account things like parking requirements, things that maybe historically, for whatever reason, were a certain way, that now with information, we realize that, maybe we don't need to be as strict with that because we see the value in having more of that square footage on that lot be a building than a parking lot, as an example. And so it's all just part of that educational piece. And I also want to take a quick second to thank you for all your work. I know it's been a crazy few months with COVID, but thank you for sticking with us and for working with us through this effort.
Yeah, just a note, Mike rattled off all the staff that we worked with. Your staff have been awesome. They've been really responsive. To really kind of get this into the culture of your organization, you do need to, usually the city manager and the finance director are the one that will geek out on this stuff. Sometimes a planning director. But to see kind of the collective input of your staff from Ken on the engineering side, from Julie on the planning side, from Gilbert too, I think your staff understands kind of how this can be used citywide, but also in their individual roles. So, I hope some of these kind of this language and stuff sticks, beyond this study, but, I'm just glad to be at another council meeting in person, because doing
Question
these-
for you.
Yes, sir.
Do you have an opinion on ag exemptions within the city limits? Whether or not there should be a time limit on how long someone can carry an ag exemption? Or how to get rid of those so that you can get the property value proper and maybe get that piece turned?
The ag exemptions are tough, but it starts with this kind of conversation of how is the city going to pay for the services that we have, and getting, ag exemptions are one, people that own property in a downtown that aren't selling it are another. How do you get people that are sitting on land to actually, do something and move it? I think putting a time limit on it is a good thing. We're just now starting to explore that. I was talking with Bennett Sandlin the other day from TML, about some of these things of, what would that look like? But I just encourage every city to start with this open dialogue with the citizens about, here's the things we have to pay for, and here's what we have right now. And when we have vacant land, if you're sitting on it for ag exemptions, or you're sitting in a building and not allowing, you're an out-of-town owner or something, that's costing the city and costing the taxpayers a lot of money. When you have land that the city is paying to serve with streets and full services, and it doesn't have a building on it, that's just a really tough thing. So one-on-one with property owners, it's a difficult conversation, but if you can have the broader conversation in the community about the why, some of those conversations get easier. But I don't know, I can't say there's a one-size-fits-all recommendation, but if you can get to a time limit on it, I think that would be good, at least to revisit.
And I'll add too that, a lot of the ag exempt land that we do have inside city limits, some of it, the property owner is willing to sell. But they're just selling, 500 acres, they're selling very large parcels. And so part of what I hope comes out of this exercise too is us having a community conversation with our economic development partners to figure out, how can we change that? Because I can tell you, and Kevin can too, that in other communities, whether it's EDCs, cities, or a separate third party, are literally going in, buying the land, and playing more of a developer hat.
Master developer.
And
Yeah.
cities saying, it does us no good to have those 500 acres there, and nobody's ever gonna buy 500 acres. So let's have somebody on our behalf, buy them, split them up, because at that point, it's more likely for it to move, as an example. And so communities are getting much smarter about this stuff and getting more directly involved with it, as opposed to kind of just sitting back hoping that it happens on its own, because the revenue gap or the resource gap is only getting larger. And so cities are saying, we can't just sit around and wait for this stuff to move on its own. We need to actually, jump in and do that stuff. And so I think that's part of it also. And some of it is in the floodplain or has other drainage issues too. And so, we might have property owners in ag exempt land that just think, well, nobody can do anything on our land. But if we went in there and invested in, regional detention areas or a few other things and actually make land developable, then at that point, they probably would be willing to sell or partner with somebody on something. Just for what it's worth.
Well, not necessarily ag exempt, but that's making me think about vacant buildings, maybe vacant buildings downtown. And
Right.
I mean, I know that some older buildings in residential areas, sometimes we demolish, but that's about the only discussion we have. We don't really talk about a vacant building downtown that could be utilized and may take some type of incentive to make that happen.
Yeah, I was.
Change of
Agreed.
ownership.
Agreed. And to your first point, sorry, Kevin. To your first, I can't even say the word first. To your first point, Julie has developed a plan, that she's had kind of in her back pocket, for quite a little while, that identifies some of these infill sites that maybe at once, were demolished by the city. Because to Kevin's point about focusing on infill, the conversation does stop at, demolishing that house, but we don't see through getting something else on that lot. And we kind of just leave it to chance that, somebody will step in and do it. But cities are beginning to be more intentional, partner with nonprofits, Habitat for Humanity, others, and in some cases even partnering with private residential developers to kind of set up a mechanism to where, as some of these houses go down, some of these properties get taken over, they kind of enter the funnel to somebody to actually do something about it. That's why we even had a conversation at some point about a municipal court of record and kind of increasing the ability of our municipal court to even be able to do some of these elements. So all of these things are tied together, but we need to start at, well, what's the end goal? And if we can all get behind, focusing on infill, then we can get behind some of the things that Julie has already figured out for us, that hopefully we'll present soon. Downtown vacant buildings, perfect example. Let's look at our codes. Do they make it easy? Do they make it difficult? I think I've shared with y'all that in Kingsville as an example, we had a very specific downtown incentive program. We had very specific programs that would help level the playing field for somebody that might be interested in building something out by the highway or renovate a building that might be more costly. How do you level that playing field? There are historic tax credits out there that both the state and the federal government offer. Who's educated on those? Who's putting those out there? Who's helping somebody through that process? All of those things, necessitate work and somebody paying close attention to. And we could do a better job at all those things.
Just one thing to add, Monty Anderson's a small developer. He's based up in the Dallas area, but he specializes in the infill, the small incremental redevelopment of downtown buildings, downtown blocks, and small residential infill as well. And we've started to present on a lot of this stuff together. If you saw, I don't know who saw me speak at TML, but Monty was the guy that I presented with. And I actually was talking with him on the phone when I drove into town, and I took a couple of pictures and sent them to. There's so many opportunities here. But what I think what the strategy, what part of the strategy here should be is find some folks in the community who want to be developers, who want to be a small developer. They don't have the capital to do the big stuff, but they would love to, to build a small building or have a live work where they run their business out of the front and they rent out the back, or they rent out the front to a business and they live in the back, or they own and rent out the entire building. There's a framework there, a structure there to get financing set up for small developers. And it's a really powerful way to cultivate local wealth, where you're getting those folks into buildings and they can start to own and operate those. Monty's got that framework, he's got a model, but usually to get started, those folks don't have the capital to go buy the building or to build that building themselves, and that's where some of the partnerships can help too, in terms of the city or the chamber or a local group helping to get that initial loan financed. And there's, I think this whole COVID situation too has really kind of reinforced that interest in smaller spaces, smaller businesses, cultivating a more, I like to say a more kind of resilient, self-sustaining local economy to where you're growing your jobs and your business from the bottom up and inside out instead of trying to recruit people to town. So every city has the economic development strategy to go recruit jobs from other places in. I don't see enough cities focusing on growing those businesses and the wealth in your community through the kind of that small building approach. Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a timely
Thank you, sir.
discussion for us moving forward.
That's all the city manager report that we have. We do have a short, brief executive session that we'd like to have to update council on a few items, and we'll stay here for that conversation.
So the city council will recess now at 7:06 PM into executive session in accordance with Texas Government Code Section 551.072 to deliberate the purchase, exchange, lease value of real estate interests, and under Section 551.087 to discuss or deliberate the offer of a financial or other incentive to a business prospect the city council seeks to have locate in the city of Victoria. Thank you.